So the rest of this, I'm going to say some things pertaining to this programming language, and it's very easy, tempting, because it's a language that I really care about and have personally designed and stuff, to try to turn this into a sales job where I list all the features and try to amaze you with it. And the problem with that is it's hard to go in depth on anything, and I'm sure you've already seen enough sales jobs at this conference, and it's only day one, right? Because that happens a lot in a situation like this. So I'm going to turn this more into a little bit of a progress report of what I'm working on, and that'll get very concrete and just show in specific terms what I'm doing. And then I'm going to go do a little bit of a dive into one feature. So the first thing that I will do is a demo of what I've been working on, mostly for the past few months. It's a game, because if you make a programming language, you're making a lot of design decisions, and you're justifying them in your mind, but unless that gets tested by reality, you don't know if your ideas are right. You don't know if they're working. You don't know if the features in the language could be better than they otherwise should be. So I figured, well, we should make and ship a game on this thing. So here's what I've got so far. And again, this is a work in progress. These are not final visuals. But it's a nice little grid-based game where I've got a guy who can run around. He can push blocks and stuff. This is like the one level that we have that actually looks good enough to show. It's not remotely final, but it actually looks like something. The rest of them look like programmer blocks and stuff. A lot of the work I've been doing lately is on the in-game editor, because I think for productivity it's really good to have that. So I can just hit F11 to pop back and forth between the editor and the game. I can load this scene in the editor, right? I can select stuff, and I've got manipulator widgets. I can move my camera. I can I've got my nice, change the color of the thing, make it a weird green colored block. I don't know, let's copy and paste it, and paste again. Let's keep selecting things and paste again. And you get it's an editor, right? But it's got, I guess what I'm just trying to show is it's got a reasonable amount of functionality, which is a way of testing the language. I can, of course, I can go into the different fields of stuff. This is directly relevant to what we're going to talk about later, and I can just type in to change, I put the block on the guy. Let's put it above him, whatever. That's the general idea. So, and the other thing to say is there's a guy, Joshua Hulsman, who helps me working on the compiler, and he's doing, among other things, he's doing back-end work, but he's also making sure it's portable. So the whole compiler and that entire game that I showed also run on Linux right now. So this is a screenshot of a very obviously Linuxy machine running the same thing that I just showed. So I don't really want to dwell too much on what the features of the engine are. It's a pretty reasonable engine, but it's not yet production quality. It renders in GL4 just because I didn't really want to learn a new API in the middle of doing all this other stuff while they're evolving, but I dislike OpenGL quite strongly, so we're going to probably switch it to something else by the end. But it's got light maps, shadow maps, and linear light rendering with nice tone mapping. The music and sound effects were being played, in a separate thread in an audio mixer that plays PCM and will dynamically uncompress 80 PCM. And if you really want to compress something like the music, it'll page in Vorbis files and decompress them page by page, so you don't have to spend a lot of CPU decompressing all at once. And that decompression gets marshaled to another thread, right? Character animation we saw, and its serialization we'll talk about, etc. Oops. So there's enough features there that it's really not trivial. It's starting to be a really good test of the language. Now, I've been working on, I started the compiler project in late 2014, but it was a part-time project because we were kind of working on a game for a while. We shipped that game last year, and it's been about exactly 1 year since I've been working on the compiler plus this game as my actual full-time project. All the features in the engine, they're a lot further along, probably, than they would be if I was just like a guy who started out with an empty file. And that's because I pulled a lot of them from the witness, and many of those pieces came from earlier game engines, which means they're pretty far along in terms of functionality and level of development. I did not do machine automated language-to-language translation on these. I would paste the C++ into a new file and retype it by hand for several reasons. One, because that gives you a better quality resulting code. Two, it forces me to be observing at every time, like how easy is it to express this thing in this other language, right? Am I having problems? Are things getting better? And then the last reason is honestly, the code kind of needed some refactorings even before leaving C++, so it was good to do that. Now, at some point when the compiler's ready, we're going to give it away, open source, with no, a totally free license on it, usable for any purpose. And the same goes for the actual engine, because I think when you see a new language, you want something better than like a hello world program. So whatever this game and engine evolve into is going to be part of the initial release. And the good thing about that is it helps keep it real with the standard library, right? Because one of the problems with the standard library for C++ and whatever is it's mostly full of stuff that you don't really directly care about. Like you have to somehow make a connection between what you want to do and like what eventually the C++ standard library will help you with, right? And this standard library will have that kind of deeper stuff, but it'll also have like, oh, you can open a window, right? Play sound and SDL kind of things, so that you don't have to. So there's a high-quality standard version of all that stuff. The game that's been built so far has about 25 hours of gameplay, single player. It's not polished yet, and most of the levels look like programmer art slabs, but it's there, so it's non-trivial. I don't want to show the rest because we don't have time, and I don't want to actually announce the game. Okay, so let's talk about the language and what I've been having fun with. And the number one thing is compilation speed. I really like how fast it compiles now. So let me just clear the screen. And I'm going to hit F7, and when I do that, the text is kind of small, but when I do that, it'll paste a thing to do the compile. So F7, boom. So that was a full rebuild of the game. It's about 54,000, 55,000 lines of code. That's including blank lines and comments. It took about 0.8 seconds, which is actually kind of slow, because Photoshop evicted all our files from the Windows cache. So I'm going to hit it again. That time it was 0.5 seconds, because we're all cached. And so, that's about, for this size of program, it's about 0.5 seconds to compile once you're in your working loop. So that's about 104,000 lines of code per second, with none of the complications that come from incremental builds. Let's not go into it, but I've had much grief due to incremental builds, right? And the thing to say about this is a compiler in progress. It's not even optimized yet. Like I've spent maybe 2 to 4 days total in the past year making it go fast, which by the standards of game engine optimization, that is nothing. So first of all, this number is going to go down. I mean, the program size will certainly get bigger, but also this number is going to go down. So we'll see where it ends up. Now the thing to say is almost 1/3 of that total time is just link.exe running, and we don't actually need that. So what we do right now is we have a backend that outputs x64 instructions into one single .obj file, and then we pass that to link to generate an executable. And that takes 0.17 seconds out of the 0.52. If you were to subtract that, we would be more down to like 1/3 of a second instead of 1/2 of a second, and that's a big difference. So it's on the roadmap somewhere to replace link.exe, because an executable file actually isn't that different from an obj file. The main thing that ostensibly would be happening is linking of static libraries. Now, I don't know why linkers are so slow. And this, by the way, is the lowest number I could get after trying to minimize, whatever the object file is that you produce will have some varying amount of work for the linker to do. And I've been trying to minimize that amount of work, and we still end up with 0.17 seconds, which is ridiculous because one of the main jobs of the linker is to put addresses on pointers and stuff. And address space layout randomization has to redo all that when the process boots up anyway. So I don't even know what it's doing. It is not doing link time optimization because that's turned off. Okay, now I will also say that in that 0.5 seconds, we are doing way, way, way more than a C++ compiler. And I don't just mean language features. I mean in terms of actual computation work that the compiler is doing. And we're going to go through some examples next.